Story 1. The Mile That Repeats. Gary Mitchell had been hauling freight for 22 years, and he knew Interstate 80 through Nebraska like the back of his hand. Every exit, every rest stop, every slight curve in that endless stretch of flat prairie highway. On July 14, 2023, Gary was running a load of agricultural equipment from Omaha to Cheyenne, a route so familiar he could practically drive it in his sleep. The afternoon was hot and clear, temperature pushing 95 degrees, the kind of day where heat shimmers rose from the asphalt in waves. Gary had his air conditioning cranked, his favorite country playlist running, and a full tank of diesel. Everything was perfect. He'd left Omaha around noon, planning to make Cheyenne by evening, grab dinner at his favorite steakhouse, and get a solid night's sleep before the return trip. Around 3 in the afternoon, somewhere west of Grand Island, Gary noticed something odd. He passed a distinctive red barn on the north side of the highway, the kind of structure you notice because it's been painted with a giant advertisement for some long-defunct farm supply company. Gary had seen that barn 100 times. What struck him as strange was that about 2 minutes later, he passed the same barn again. At first, Gary thought maybe there were 2 similar barns. Nebraska had plenty of old agricultural buildings. But this wasn't just similar, it was identical. Same faded red paint, same white lettering advertising Miller's Feed and Seed, same broken section of roof on the east side, same cluster of 3 cottonwood trees beside it. Gary checked his odometer. He'd traveled 2.3 miles between sightings of the barn. He looked at his GPS. It showed him progressing normally westbound on I-80, the blue line tracking steadily toward Wyoming. Nothing unusual. Then, 2 minutes later, he passed the barn again. Gary's stomach tightened. This wasn't right. He was driving forward at 65 miles per hour. His GPS confirmed forward movement, but he kept passing the same landmark. He started paying closer attention to other features. A particular mile marker, 247. A road sign advertising a truck stop in 30 miles. A small bridge over a dry creek bed. Every 2.3 miles, they repeated. The exact same sequence of landmarks, the exact same features, the exact same everything. Gary was driving through a loop, but unlike a circular track, his GPS and odometer insisted he was making forward progress. He tried a CB radio. Breaker 19, this is Gray Ghost westbound on 80 near Grand Island. Anyone else experiencing anything weird out here? Static greeted him. He cycled through channels. More static. Not even the usual background chatter that accompanied most highway drives. The CB was working. He could hear the static clearly, but there were no other voices. Gary grabbed his phone and tried to call his dispatcher. The call wouldn't connect. Not no signal, but something stranger. The phone showed full bars, showed it was calling, but produced only silence. No ringing, no error message, just dead air. He was alone on the highway now. That was the next thing Gary noticed. When he'd first observed the repeating barn, there had been other vehicles around, a few cars, another semi in the distance. But over the past several loops, they had all disappeared. Now it was just Gary, his truck, and that endlessly repeating 2.3-mile stretch of Nebraska highway. Gary tried to break the pattern. At what he estimated was the midpoint of the loop, he pulled onto the shoulder and stopped. He climbed out of his cab, and the heat hit him like a physical force. But something was wrong with the heat. It wasn't natural summer warmth. It was uniform, artificial, like standing in an enormous oven set to a precise temperature. The landscape around him looked real. Prairie grass, telephone poles, the highway stretching in both directions. But when Gary really focused, he noticed details that didn't quite match reality. The grass didn't move, despite a wind he could feel against his skin. The telephone wires didn't sway. Birds flew overhead, but their flight paths were identical each time they crossed his field of vision, like animations on a loop. Gary got back in his truck and started driving again. The barn appeared right on schedule. He tried driving faster, pushing his speed to 75 miles per hour. The barn still appeared at 2.3 miles, but now it took less clock time. He tried driving slower, 40 miles per hour. The barn appeared at the same interval, but took more time. It wasn't about distance or time, it was about progression through the loop. No matter what speed he traveled, the pattern held. Hours passed. Gary's fuel gauge didn't move from 3/4 full, even though he'd been driving continuously. The sun didn't move in the sky, frozen at that same 3 o'clock angle. His clock advanced, 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., but the light never changed. Eternal afternoon. Gary started documenting what he saw, recording video on his phone of the repeating landmarks. When he played the videos back, they showed exactly what he'd recorded: the barn, the mile marker, the bridge. But when he tried to save the files, they corrupted instantly, becoming unreadable data. By what his clock claimed was 9 p.m., Gary was starting to panic. He'd been in this loop for 6 hours. 6 hours of driving the same 2.3 miles over and over, watching the same barn pass his window more than 100 times. His mind felt strained, reality itself seeming to warp around the edges.
That's when he saw the other truck. It appeared in his rearview mirror, a dark blue Kenworth, maintaining a steady distance behind him. Gary's heart leaped. Another driver. Someone else who might be trapped in this same nightmare, or better yet, someone who could help him escape. Gary slowed down, trying to let the other truck catch up. But it slowed too, maintaining that exact distance. Gary sped up. The truck matched his speed perfectly. Gary grabbed his CB. "Blue Kenworth behind me on 80. This is Gray Ghost. Can you hear me? Are you experiencing the same thing I am?" For a moment, nothing. Then a voice came through, but it was wrong. Too flat, too emotionless, like computer-generated speech. "You are in the repeating mile. You cannot leave. Accept the loop. Become part of the pattern." What the hell are you talking about? How do I get out? There is no out. There is only the mile, the barn, the marker 247, the bridge, forever repeating. You will drive until you understand, until you become part of the pattern. Gary looked in his mirror. The blue Kenworth was closer now, and he could see the driver, or what should have been the driver. The figure behind the wheel was human-shaped, but wrong. Proportions off, movements too stiff, like a puppet controlled by someone who'd never seen a real person move. The thing spoke again through the CB. "You will drive until you understand, until you become part of the pattern. Until you become part of the pattern. Until you become part of the pattern." Gary looked in his mirror. The blue Kenworth was closer now, and he could see the driver, or what should have been the driver. The figure behind the wheel was human-shaped, but wrong. Proportions off, movements too stiff, like a puppet controlled by someone who'd never seen a real person move. The thing spoke again through the CB. "You will drive until you understand, until you become part of the pattern." No, I'm not spending eternity driving the same stretch of highway. Gary floored the accelerator. His big rig surged forward, engine roaring. The blue Kenworth fell back, but only temporarily. Within moments, it was matching his speed again, maintaining position. Gary's mind raced. There had to be a way out. Loops had exits, patterns had breaks. He thought about the consistent elements. The barn, the mile marker 247, the bridge. What if the key wasn't to go forward, but to disrupt the pattern entirely? At mile marker 247, instead of continuing on the highway, Gary cranked his wheel hard to the right. His truck left the pavement, bouncing onto the prairie grass. He drove perpendicular to the highway, heading north into open terrain. The grass was flat and even, allowing his truck to maintain speed. Gary drove for what he estimated was a full mile, putting the highway well behind him. He stopped and looked back. The highway was visible, cars and trucks moving normally along it. The blue Kenworth was gone. Gary had broken free of the loop by leaving the highway entirely. But when he turned to continue north, looking for a way to loop back to civilization, he saw it. The red barn, sitting alone in the middle of the prairie, impossible, But there, and beyond it, mile marker 247, standing in the grass with no road attached. And beyond that, the bridge, spanning nothing, concrete and steel suspended in prairie air. The loop hadn't been on the highway. The highway had been part of the loop, and now Gary had brought the loop with him into the open prairie. He tried driving east. The landmarks followed, always ahead of him no matter which direction he turned. He tried driving back to the highway, but when he reached where it should have been, there was only grass. The road had disappeared, or he'd gone somewhere roads couldn't reach. Gary's clock showed midnight. 9 hours trapped in this repeating nightmare. His fuel gauge finally started to drop, quarter tank. He'd burn through it within hours, and then he'd be stranded in this prairie limbo with its impossible landmarks. In desperation, Gary tried the one thing he hadn't attempted. He stopped the truck, turned off the engine, and waited. No movement, no progression through the loop, just stillness. Minutes passed. His clock advanced, but nothing else changed. Then slowly, the light shifted. The frozen afternoon sun finally moved, dropping toward the western horizon. Real time was reasserting itself. By the clock, it was 12:47 a.m. when the sun set. Impossible, but true. Darkness fell, complete and natural. Stars appeared overhead, real constellations Gary recognized. And in that darkness, he saw lights in the distance. Highway lights. Interstate 80. Gary started his engine and drove toward the lights. This time there were no repeating landmarks, no loops. Just prairie grass giving way to an entrance ramp, and suddenly he was back on Interstate 80, westbound, with normal traffic flowing around him. His GPS showed him near the town of Ogallala, about 100 miles west of where he'd entered the loop. His clock showed 1:15 a.m., July 15th. About 10 hours had passed since the loop began, but somehow he'd also traveled 100 miles. Gary pulled into the first truck stop he found. He was shaking, exhausted, his mind struggling to process what had happened. He filed his logs showing a normal driving day. There was no way to document what he had actually experienced. Who would believe him?
He completed his delivery to Cheyenne the next day, then returned to Omaha. He told no one about the repeating mile, the impossible barn, the blue Kenworth with its puppet driver. It sounded insane even to him. But Gary never drove that particular stretch of I-80 again. He took alternate routes, even when they added hours to his trips. And sometimes, in his nightmares, he's back in the loop, watching the red barn pass his window again and again, hearing that flat voice telling him to accept the pattern, to drive forever through that same 2.3 miles of highway that shouldn't exist. The repeating mile is still out there, Gary knows, waiting for the next driver who doesn't notice when landmarks start to repeat, waiting to trap someone else in its endless pattern. And somewhere in that loop, maybe the blue Kenworth still drives, still following, still offering that terrible bargain. Accept the pattern and the suffering ends. Drive forever in peaceful repetition. Gary wonders how many drivers accepted that offer. How many trucks on America's highways are driven by things that only look human, stuck in loops of their own, carrying cargo to destinations that don't exist. He doesn't want to know. He just drives different routes now and watches for red barns and prays he never sees mile marker 247 again. Story 2. The Passenger Who Wasn't There. Linda Reeves had 18 years of solo driving under her belt, and she'd never once picked up a hitchhiker. Company policy strictly forbade it, insurance wouldn't cover it, and Linda valued her safety too much to risk it. So when she woke up at a rest stop in Montana on September 2nd, 2022, and found a man sitting in her passenger seat, her first reaction was terror followed by fury. "Get out of my truck, right now!" Linda's hand went to the tire iron she kept under her seat. The man looked at her with sad, confused eyes. He was middle-aged, wearing ordinary clothes, jeans, a flannel shirt, work boots. He looked solid and real, but something about him was off. His edges seemed slightly blurred, like a photograph taken with a shaky hand. "I don't know how I got here, I was driving, there was fog, then I was in your passenger seat. I don't care about your story. You broke into my truck. I'm calling the police. Linda grabbed her phone. Please don't. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just confused. Where are we? Montana. Now get out before I make you get out. The man looked out the window at the rest stop, at the mountains in the distance, at the morning light filtering through clouds. His expression was one of complete bewilderment. Montana? I was in Oregon. How did I get to Montana? Despite her fear and anger, Linda paused. The man seemed genuinely lost, genuinely confused, and something about him struck her as more sad than threatening. Look, I don't know how you got in here, but you need to leave. I can drop you at the next town with a bus station and be done with it. She pulled out of the rest stop and merged onto I-90. For the first few miles, the man sat quietly, looking out the window. Then he spoke. What year is it? Linda glanced at him sharply. What kind of question is that? Please, just tell me what year it is. 2022. September. The man's face went pale. No, that's not possible. It was 2019. March of 2019. I was driving through the fog on Highway 26 in Oregon. I was going to Portland. That was 3 days ago. 3 days ago was August 31st, 2022. You've lost more than 3 days, friend. I don't understand. I don't understand any of this. The man looked at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. I remembered the fog. It was so thick, I couldn't see more than a few feet. I pulled over to wait it out. I must have fallen asleep. Then I woke up here. Linda was starting to feel uneasy. The man's confusion seemed too genuine to be an act. What's your name? David. David Carpenter. I'm a salesman. Agricultural equipment. I was driving to Portland for a meeting. I have a wife, Karen, 2 kids, Michael and Sarah. I need to call them. Can I use your phone? Linda handed him her phone, watching carefully. David dialed with shaking hands. Linda heard it ring, then a woman's voice answered.
Karen, it's me. I don't know what happened, but I'm okay. I'm in Montana with a truck driver. I need you to... He stopped. Linda could hear the woman on the other end speaking, her voice rising in pitch. Then David's face crumbled. No, that's not possible. I talked to you 3 days ago. Our anniversary was last week. We went to that Italian place you like. How can I have been gone for 3 years? Linda's blood ran cold. She thought the man was confused or mentally ill, but the conversation she was hearing sounded real. The woman on the phone was crying now, screaming, saying things Linda couldn't quite make out. David ended the call and handed the phone back with trembling hands. She says I disappeared in March of 2019. She says there was a search. They found my car on Highway 26, pulled over in the fog, but I was gone. No trace. They declared me legally dead last year. She remarried 6 months ago. Linda didn't know what to say. She kept driving, her mind racing. This was impossible. People didn't lose 3 years. But the man's anguish was real, and that phone call had sounded genuine. I need to go home. I need to see my family. Can you take me to Oregon? I can't. I have a delivery in Billings. But I can help you figure out what happened. Maybe we should go to the police. And tell them what? That I time traveled? They'll think I'm crazy or lying. My wife thinks I abandoned her. My kids... His voice broke. My kids grew up without me. 3 years. Sarah was 8. Now she's 11. Michael was 5. He probably barely remembers me. They drove in silence for a while. Linda's mind churned with possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. If David really had lost 3 years, where had he been? And why had he appeared in her truck specifically? Then Linda noticed something that made her skin crawl. She looked down at the passenger seat, then back at the road, then at the seat again. She could see through David. Just slightly, just at the edges.
but he was becoming translucent. "David, how do you feel physically, I mean?" He looked at his hands. "Strange. Light. Like I'm not entirely here." He noticed the translucency, too, and gasped. "What's happening to me?" "I don't know, but I think—" Linda's voice caught. I think you might not be entirely real. I think you might be some kind of echo or projection." "What does that mean?" "I don't know." Linda was panicking now. This was way beyond anything she could understand or handle. She had a ghost or time traveler or something impossible in her passenger seat, and he was fading away before her eyes. David was becoming more translucent by the minute. Linda could see the seat fabric through his body now, could see the landscape passing outside the window through his chest. He looked at her with desperate eyes. "I don't want to disappear again. I just found my way back. I need to see my family. I need them to know I didn't abandon them." Linda made a decision. "Tell me everything you want them to know. I'll find them and I'll tell them." David spent the next hour talking. He told Linda about his wife, his children, his life. He described memories, shared messages of love, explained things only his family would understand. Linda recorded it all on her phone, though she could barely see David anymore. He was almost completely translucent now, a whisper of a person. "Why did I come back?" David wondered aloud, his voice fading. "Why now? Why here?" "Maybe you never left," Linda said softly. "Maybe you've been traveling these highways for 3 years as some kind of ghost, and you're only just now becoming aware of it." David looked out at the passing Montana landscape. "I've been driving for 3 years without knowing it. Just existing on the roads. That's a special kind of hell. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing me. Please tell Karen I loved her. Tell her I didn't leave by choice. Tell the kids their father thought about them every day, even if I didn't know I was thinking about them." "I will, I promise." David smiled, and then he was gone. Not fading away gradually, but simply ceasing to exist between one moment and the next. The passenger seat was empty, with no evidence anyone had ever sat there. Linda pulled over, her hands shaking too badly to drive safely. She sat on the shoulder of I-90 and cried for a man she'd known for 2 hours, a man who'd lost 3 years of his life and couldn't get them back.
Shared were too specific, too personal to be fake. Whatever Linda had encountered, it had really been David, or some echo of him. Linda never learned what happened during those 3 years. She never discovered why David had appeared in her truck specifically, or where he'd been, or how he'd lost time. Some mysteries don't have answers. But Linda thinks about him often, about the man who drove highways as a ghost for 3 years without knowing he was already gone, about families who wait for travelers who never return, about the thin line between here and wherever David spent those lost years. And sometimes, when Linda is driving late at night on empty highways, she glances at her passenger seat, half expecting, half dreading to see someone there. Another lost soul, another time traveler, another ghost looking for the way home. The roads are full of them, Linda believes now. Drivers who disappeared into fog or storms or just empty miles, who got lost in the spaces between destinations, who drive on without knowing they're gone until one day they become aware, appear in someone's passenger seat, and realize with horror that years have passed. David found his way back, if only for a few hours. Others might not be so lucky. They might drive forever, ghosts on highways that never end, going nowhere, coming from nothing, trapped in a journey that has no destination. Linda watches for them now. The passenger who wasn't there, who couldn't be there, but was. She watches, and sometimes she swears she sees them. Translucent figures in other trucks, sitting in passenger seats, looking lost and confused and desperately sad. The highway takes them, and sometimes, rarely, it gives them back. Just for a moment. Just long enough
to say goodbye. Story 3. The Truck Stop at the End of the World. Raymond Foster had been a long-haul trucker for 19 years when he stopped at what he thought was a Flying J truck stop somewhere in western Kansas on November 8, 2023. He'd been driving for 11 hours straight, running a load of furniture from Denver to St. Louis, and he desperately needed fuel, food, and a bathroom. The truck stop appeared out of the darkness around 9 p.m., bright lights cutting through the prairie night. Raymond took the exit, relieved to see what looked like a well-maintained facility. Multiple fuel islands, a large convenience store, a restaurant, even a small motel. Perfect for his needs. But as Raymond pulled into the parking lot, he noticed something odd. There were dozens of trucks parked, but no drivers visible. No one fueling up, no one walking to or from the building, no one doing the normal activities you'd see at a busy truck stop. Just empty trucks sitting silently in neat rows. Raymond parked and climbed out. The air felt wrong. Not cold exactly, but absent of temperature, like it had no thermal quality at all. The lights were bright but cast no shadows, and the silence was absolute. No highway noise, no idling engines, no wind, nothing. He walked toward the convenience store. Through the windows, he could see people inside, at least a dozen figures moving around, shopping, standing in line at the register. That was reassuring. Maybe the truck drivers were all inside. Raymond pushed open the door, and a bell chimed. The people inside turned to look at him in perfect unison. That was the first truly unsettling thing. Every single person moved at exactly the same moment, heads turning with mechanical precision, eyes locking on to Raymond with expressions that were perfectly blank. Hello?" Raymond said uncertainly. The people stared at him for 5 seconds. Raymond counted them, then turned back to what they were doing with that same synchronized movement. Raymond stood in the doorway, his instincts screaming at him to leave, but his practical need for fuel and food overriding his fear. He walked toward the restroom. It was clean, normal-looking, functional. But when Raymond washed his hands, the water felt wrong. It was wet. It looked like water, but it had no temperature, and left his hands feeling exactly as they had been. Not cleaner, not wetter, just the same.
That's wonderful. Will there be anything else? No, just fuel. Excellent. How are you today? Raymond blinked. You just asked me that. I did? I'm sorry. How are you today? A chill ran down Raymond's spine. The woman was stuck, repeating herself like a scratched record. He backed away from the counter and quickly left the store. Outside, the parking lot looked the same. Dozens of trucks, no drivers. Raymond walked between the rows, checking cabs. Every single truck was empty, but many still had personal items visible. Coffee mugs, logbooks, photos taped to dashboards. These trucks had drivers who'd simply vanished. Raymond reached his truck and considered just leaving without fuel. His gauge showed a quarter tank, enough to get back to the highway and find a different stop. But when he tried to start his engine, nothing happened. The electrical systems powered up fine, but the engine wouldn't turn over. He tried again. Nothing. The starter didn't even engage. His truck, which had been running perfectly moments ago, was now completely dead. Raymond climbed out and looked around the parking lot. The other trucks sat silent and dark. Were their engines dead too? Is that why they'd been abandoned here? He needed help. Raymond walked toward the restaurant attached to the truck stop, hoping to find someone who could explain what was happening, or at least call for roadside assistance. The restaurant was lit and appeared open. Through the windows, Raymond could see people sitting in booths, waitresses moving between tables, the normal scene of a highway diner. He pushed open the door. Everyone inside froze. Not like the people in the convenience store turning to look,
This was complete stillness. Waitresses stopped mid-step, one foot raised. Diners froze with forks halfway to their mouths. Someone pouring coffee became a statue with liquid suspended between pot and cup. Raymond stood in the doorway, his breath coming faster. This wasn't right. This wasn't possible. Hello? His voice seemed to be absorbed by the air, producing no echo. Slowly, in perfect unison, every head in the restaurant turned toward him. The bodies didn't move, just the heads, rotating smoothly on necks that suddenly seemed too flexible. Dozens of eyes locked onto Raymond, and dozens of mouths opened simultaneously. They spoke with one voice, all of them saying the exact same words at the exact same time. Welcome to the end of the line. You cannot leave. You are here now. You are part of the stop. Raymond ran. Pure panic overrode everything else. He burst from the restaurant and sprinted toward the parking lot exit, toward the access road that led back to the highway. But the road was gone. Where the exit should have been, there was just darkness. Not the darkness of night, but absolute void. The complete absence of light, matter, or space. Raymond skidded to a stop at the edge of it. When he looked down, the asphalt simply ended, giving way to nothing. He was trapped. The truck stop existed in a bubble surrounded by void. There was no highway beyond it, no Kansas prairie, no real world, just this island of light and pavement suspended in nothingness. Raymond walked around the perimeter. Every direction ended in that same void. The truck stop was the entirety of existence here, a pocket reality cut off from everything else. He returned to his truck and climbed inside, locking the doors. His phone had no signal. His CB radio produced only static. His GPS showed him in the middle of the Kansas wilderness, but that couldn't be right. He wasn't in Kansas anymore. He wasn't anywhere. Hours passed. Raymond watched through his windows as the people in the convenience store and restaurant continued their loops, shopping without buying, eating without consuming, moving through routines that had no beginning or end. Were they real people, trapped here and driven mad by repetition until they became automatons, or had they never been real at all? Around what Raymond's clock claimed was 3 a.m., he saw another vehicle arrive. A car pulled into the parking lot, an elderly couple inside. Raymond watched as they went through the same process he had, parking, entering the convenience store, realizing something was wrong, trying to leave, discovering the void. He wanted to warn them, but what would he say? They were trapped just like him. Within an hour, Raymond saw the couple return to their car, get in, and just sit there, defeated, hopeless, knowing there was nowhere to go. Over the next several days, Raymond couldn't be sure time was passing normally. More vehicles arrived. A motorcycle, a bus with a single passenger, a delivery van. Each time the new arrivals went through the same realization, the same despair, the same defeat. The truck stop was collecting travelers, pulling them from the real highway into this pocket dimension and trapping them here. But why? What was the purpose? Raymond started to notice changes in the other arrivals. After several days of being trapped, they'd leave their vehicles and enter the convenience store or restaurant. They'd begin moving.
Like the others, synchronized, repetitive, purposeless. They were becoming part of the pattern, absorbed into the truck stop's strange machinery. He felt it pulling at him, too. An urge to go inside, to join the loops, to stop thinking and just move through the meaningless routines. It would be easier than sitting in his truck, maintaining awareness, clinging to hope of escape. The truck stop wanted him to surrender. Raymond resisted. He documented everything on his phone, writing detailed notes about the phenomenon even though he knew no one might ever read them. He talked to himself, told stories from his life, anything to maintain his sense of individual identity against the pressure to conform and dissolve into the collective. On what Raymond estimated was the 15th day, he noticed the void was getting closer. The parking lot was shrinking. Each day, another few feet of asphalt would be gone, replaced by that absolute nothingness. The truck stop was being consumed by the void, slowly swallowed. Raymond understood then what this place was. A truck stop that had somehow slipped through reality, become unmoored from the normal world. It existed in a collapsing bubble, drawing in travelers as it slowly ceased to exist. The people inside weren't maintaining it. They were being absorbed by it, becoming part of its fading structure. When the void finally consumed everything, the truck stop and everyone in it would simply cease to exist, removed from reality entirely, as if they'd never been. Raymond made a decision. He'd rather face the void directly than slowly dissolve into the truck stop's patterns. When the collapsing boundary reached his truck, he'd walk into it and accept whatever came. That night, or what Raymond's damaged sense of time told him was night, the void reached his truck. Raymond stood at the edge, looking into absolute nothing. Behind him, the truck stop lights glowed, the frozen people continued their loops, and the collected vehicles sat in silent rows. Raymond took a deep breath and stepped into the void. There was a moment of absolute sensory deprivation. No sight, no sound, no touch, no sense of existing at all. Then light and noise, and Raymond was falling. He hit pavement hard, gasping, his body suddenly real and solid again. He was on the side of Interstate 70 in Kansas, emergency flashers marking his position. His truck was beside him, engine idling normally. Traffic passed at regular speeds. The world was real again. Raymond climbed into his cab with shaking hands. His phone showed November 8th, about 9:15 p.m., only minutes after he'd taken the exit to the truck stop. According to his phone and his truck's logs, he hadn't been gone at all. But Raymond's memory said otherwise. 15 days trapped in a dissolving pocket of reality. Raymond drove away from that spot as fast as legally possible, only stopping when he'd put 200 miles between himself and wherever the truck stop had been. He never found it on any map, never saw any sign or exit that matched his memory. But Raymond knows it's real. The truck stop at the end of the world, slowly being consumed by nothing, collecting travelers who will be erased from existence. He knows there are dozens of people trapped there now, including that elderly couple and the bus passenger and the motorcyclist. He knows they're either fighting to maintain identity or slowly becoming part of the loops. And he knows that somewhere out there, the truck stop still exists, still pulling travelers from reality into its collapsing bubble, still waiting at the edge of the void. Raymond doesn't drive I-70 through Kansas anymore. He takes I-80 to the north or I-40 to the south, adding hundreds of miles to his routes. Other drivers think he's crazy, paranoid, wasting time and fuel. But Raymond knows better. The truck stop at the end of the world is waiting, and one day its void will finish consuming it, and everyone trapped inside will simply cease to have ever existed. Raymond escaped. Others won't be so lucky. The highway to nowhere is still open, and travelers still take the exit, not knowing they're driving toward erasure. The truck stop collects them all, and the void consumes what the truck stop has collected, until nothing remains, until it's as if they never drove at all. Story 4. The Fog That Follows. Christine Wallace had driven trucks for 16 years, and she'd seen every kind of weather the Pacific Northwest could throw at her. Rain so heavy that the wipers couldn't keep up, snow that turned highways into skating rinks, wind that pushed her trailer sideways. But the fog she encountered on Highway 101 in Oregon on January 19, 2023, was different from anything in her experience.
Christine was hauling seafood from Newport to Portland, a route she ran twice a week. She knew every curve, every town, every scenic viewpoint. The forecast had called for patchy fog along the coast, normal for January, so Christine wasn't concerned when mist started forming around 7 in the evening. But this fog was strange. It formed too quickly, going from light mist to dense wall in under a minute. Christine slowed from 60 to 40 miles per hour, her hazard lights on, following the
white line on the road's edge. Other vehicles pulled over, their flashers blinking through the gray murk. Then Christine noticed something that made her uneasy. The fog was thicker behind her than ahead. In her mirror, she could see a wall of gray, so dense it looked almost solid, rolling up the highway like an avalanche. But ahead, the fog was manageable, thick, but not impossible to navigate. The wall of fog behind her was gaining. Christine could see it clearly in her mirrors, a defined edge moving forward, consuming the highway, swallowing other vehicles. And it was moving fast, faster than traffic, faster than any natural fog bank. Christine pressed her accelerator, speeding up to stay ahead of it. The wall kept coming, 50 miles per hour, 60, 70. The wall maintained distance, always about 100 yards behind her, but never falling back, never stopping. She grabbed her CB radio. Anyone on 101, this is Ice Queen northbound near Waldport. Anyone else seeing this weird fog bank? A trucker's voice responded immediately. Ice Queen, this is Rolling Thunder. I'm about 5 miles ahead of you. What fog? It's clear up here. Christine looked ahead. He was right. The fog was thinning, visibility improving. But behind her, that wall was still there, still coming. There's a massive fog bank rolling up from the south. It's moving faster than traffic. You might want to get off the highway. I don't see any fog, Ice Queen. Skies are clear. That didn't make sense. The fog wall behind Christine was enormous, had to be visible for miles. How could a driver 5 miles ahead not see it? Unless it wasn't following the highway. Unless it was following her specifically. Christine took the next exit, swinging onto a side road that led toward a small coastal town. The wall followed. It didn't continue up Highway 101, it turned with her, staying exactly the same distance behind her truck. Oh no. No, Christine's heart hammered. This wasn't natural fog. It couldn't be. Natural weather systems don't follow individual vehicles. She tried to outrun it, pushing her speed to dangerous levels on winding coastal roads. The wall kept pace. She tried stopping, pulling over to see if it would pass. The wall stopped too, maintaining that 100-yard distance, a perfect barrier of gray cutting her off from everything behind her. Christine got back on the highway heading north, hoping to reach Portland, to reach civilization, to reach anywhere with people and lights and safety. But the wall followed, patient and persistent, cutting her off from the rest of the world. She tried her phone, no signal. The fog was blocking it somehow. Her GPS worked, but showed a strange artifact, a gray zone behind her position that moved as she moved, always maintaining the same distance. Miles passed. Christine drove through the night, exhausted, terrified, not daring to stop because she had no idea what would happen if the fog caught her. She passed through small towns, Toledo, Siletz, Lincoln City, and each time she looked for police or help, but the fog seemed to hide her. People looked right at her truck, but didn't react, as if they couldn't quite see her. She was being isolated, cut off. The fog was creating a bubble around her that separated her from the rest of reality. By 2 in the morning, Christine was approaching Salem, still more than an hour from Portland. She was running out of fuel and energy. She had been driving for 7 hours straight, most of it at high speeds, and her reserves were nearly empty. The fog seemed to sense her weakening. It crept closer, not rapidly but steadily, 90 yards behind her now instead of 100, then 80 yards, 70. Christine pushed harder, but her truck was governed at 75 miles per hour. She couldn't go faster, and the fog was catching up. At 60 yards, Christine could see shapes in the fog, humanoid figures, tall and thin, moving through the gray mist. They walked in the same direction she was driving, but impossibly fast. Their movements wrong, joints bending at angles that shouldn't work. At 50 yards, the shapes became clearer. They weren't quite human, proportions off, limbs too long, faces blank like mannequins. And they were dozens of them, a crowd of figures walking in lockstep, following her truck.
Christine was crying now, her vision blurred, hands cramping on the wheel. She couldn't keep this up. She had to stop. But what happened if she stopped? At 40 yards, they heard them. Not through her windows or doors, but in her head. Whispers. Dozens of voices speaking in overlapping sentences. Stop driving. Let us catch you. We've been chasing so long. We're tired. Stop and let us rest. Who are you? Christine screamed.
We're the ones who drove too long, who pushed too hard, who fell asleep at the wheel and left the road and entered the fog. Now we're part of it. We follow. We chase. We bring others into the fog with us. Stop driving and join us. It's peaceful here. No more deliveries, no more schedules. Just driving forever in the gray. I'm not joining you. You will, eventually. Everyone who enters the fog becomes part of the fog. Your truck is already changing. Look at it.
Christine glanced at her dashboard. The instruments were fading, displays becoming dimmer, as if power was draining. The steering wheel felt insubstantial under her hands, less solid than it should be. The truck was dissolving into the fog, becoming part of it. At 30 yards, she could feel them pulling at her, a pressure against her mind, urging her to stop, to give up, to let the fog take her. It would be so easy. She was so tired. She saw a sign. Salem, next exit. An idea formed through her exhaustion. The figures in the fog were chasing her on the highway. But what if she left the highway entirely? Not just an exit, but abandoning the truck, running on foot. The fog followed her truck, not her. Maybe. Christine took the Salem exit and drove into the city, heading for the downtown area. The fog followed, but it was harder for it to navigate streets with buildings and tight corners. The wall fragmented, losing cohesion, though the shapes inside it continued pursuing. Christine found a busy intersection. Even at 2 in the morning, there were some people around, some lights, some activity. She pulled her truck into a parking lot, grabbed her phone and wallet, and ran. The fog rushed toward her parked truck, the shapes converging on it. Christine sprinted across the street, into an all-night diner, through the startled customers, and out the back door. She kept running, putting blocks between herself and her truck. Behind her, she heard a sound like wind rushing through a tunnel. The fog had reached her truck. When Christine looked back, she saw the wall of gray surrounding her vehicle, obscuring it from view. The shapes moved around it like sharks, circling prey. Christine kept running until she found a police station. She burst through the doors, gasping, and tried to explain what had happened. The police were skeptical, but agreed to check on her truck. By the time they reached the parking lot, only 20 minutes later, the fog was gone. Christine's truck sat where she'd left it, looking perfectly normal. The police found no evidence of any fog, no strange shapes, nothing to support her story. But Christine's truck had changed. The interior was cold, frigidly cold, despite having been running. Frost covered the inside of the windows. The logbook showed entries Christine hadn't made, miles driven that weren't possible. And there was condensation on all the surfaces in patterns that looked almost like writing. Next time we will catch you. Christine abandoned the truck and the cargo. Her company was furious, but she didn't care. She couldn't drive that truck again. Whatever the fog was, it had marked her vehicle, possibly marked her. She quit trucking entirely. The experience had broken something fundamental in her relationship with the highway. She couldn't trust the weather anymore, couldn't trust the road. Any fog, any mist might be the start of another chase. Christine moved inland, to the high desert of eastern Oregon where fog was rare. She got a job in a warehouse, never driving, never traveling, staying in one place. But sometimes on foggy mornings, she sees it through her apartment window. A wall of gray, just visible in the distance, moving slowly toward her building. It never reaches her. Not yet. It just sits at the edge of visibility, reminding her that it knows where she is, that it's still following, even without the truck, that one day it will complete the chase it started on Highway 101. The fog that follows doesn't forget. Christine learned that.
It marked her when she entered it, claimed her as one of its own. And though she escaped that night in Salem, the escape was temporary. The fog is patient. It has all the time in the world, and Christine knows, with sick certainty, that eventually it will catch her. Eventually she'll be walking those misty roads with the other shapes, chasing the next driver who enters the fog, trying to expand the gray army one trucker at a time. She sees them sometimes in her dreams, the figures with their wrong proportions and blank faces. They're waiting for her. They've been waiting ever since she outran them, and they're so patient. The fog that follows never stops. It just waits. And Christine Wallace, former trucker, current warehouse worker, knows her borrowed time is running out. One morning she'll wake up, and the fog will be at her door, and this time, there will be nowhere to run. Story 5. The Convoy from Nowhere.
Michael Torres had 17 years behind the wheel when he joined what he thought was a legitimate convoy on Interstate 40 through Texas on August 7, 2022. He'd been driving solo from Albuquerque to Memphis, carrying electronics, when he heard the call on his CB around midnight. All eastbound traffic on 40. There's a convoy forming at mile marker 85, running together for safety and fuel efficiency. All welcome. Channel 19. Michael thought it was a good idea. There have been reports of aggressive drivers targeting solo trucks, and running in a group provided safety and social interaction on the long, empty stretches of Texas highway. He adjusted his speed to join the convoy at the designated marker. 7 trucks were already formed up when Michael arrived, running in a neat line with proper spacing. Michael keyed his CB. "This is Mountain Man, requesting to join the convoy." A friendly voice responded. "Welcome, Mountain Man. Pull in at the back. We're running to Little Rock together, then splitting up. Keep your spacing at 50 yards, maintain speed at 65, and stay on Channel 19. Michael fell in line. The convoy felt good. Professional, well-organized, courteous. They called out hazards, warned about speed traps, made jokes to pass the time. Normal trucker camaraderie. But around 1 in the morning, Michael noticed something odd. They'd been driving for an hour, but none of the expected towns had appeared. According to his GPS, they should have passed through Amarillo by now, but there had been no lights, no buildings, just endless dark highway. Michael checked his GPS more carefully. It showed him progressing along I-40, but the mile markers weren't matching. His GPS claimed he was at mile marker 120, but the last marker he had actually seen was mile marker 88, 32 miles of discrepancy. He keyed his CB. Anyone else noticing the mile markers seem off? Silence. Not static, complete silence, like his CB had been muted. Michael tried again. "Convoy leader, this is Mountain Man. You got ears on?" Nothing, but he could still see the 7 trucks ahead of him, running in formation, lights bright in the darkness. They looked normal, solid, real. Michael tried adjusting his CB, changing channels, checking connections. Everything seemed fine, but he couldn't transmit or receive. He was isolated despite being surrounded by other trucks. Then he noticed the trucks ahead weren't quite right. They were too uniform, all the same model, same color, same trailers. Not impossible, but unusual. And the drivers, Michael could see silhouettes in the cabs now, sat too still, never moving, never adjusting position. Michael's fear was overwhelming now. This wasn't a normal convoy. These weren't normal trucks. He joined something that only looked like a trucker convoy, something that mimicked the appearance of safety while leading him somewhere else. He made a decision. He slowed down, dropping out of formation. The distance between him and the rear truck of the convoy increased. 50 yards, 100 yards, 200 yards. The convoy continued without him, maintaining speed, eventually disappearing over the horizon. Michael was alone on the highway again. And the highway was different. I-40 through Texas was supposed to be busy, even in the early morning, but this road was empty. No other vehicles in either direction, no buildings or structures visible, just pavement and flat scrubland extending to distant mountains that looked wrong, too angular, like amateur CGI.
Michael's GPS had stopped working. It showed a blue screen with no map, no position, just error messages. His CB was still dead. His phone had no signal. He was alone on a highway that might not be I-40 anymore, might not be in Texas, might not be in any place that existed on normal maps.
He drove for hours, looking for any sign of civilization. Nothing appeared. The sun moved across the sky too quickly, going from morning to noon to evening in what felt like 3 hours instead of 12. Time itself was broken here. As false evening fell, Michael saw them in his rearview mirror. 7 trucks, running in formation, catching up to him. The convoy had looped around somehow, or the highway itself had looped, bringing them back together. Michael accelerated. The convoy matched his speed. He pushed his truck to its maximum, 80 miles per hour, dangerous speed for a fully loaded rig, but the convoy maintained distance, never quite catching up, but never falling behind. Michael's fuel was critical now. If he ran out, he'd be stranded on this impossible highway with the convoy closing in. He had maybe 30 minutes of driving left before his tanks went dry. Then he saw it. An exit. The first exit he'd seen in hours, maybe longer. A sign read, "Fuel, food, lodging, next exit." Generic, non-specific, but it offered hope. Michael took the exit at high speed. The convoy followed, all 7 trucks taking the exit in perfect synchronization. The exit ramp led to a truck stop that looked normal. Bright lights, fuel pumps, buildings. Michael pulled in and parked, jumping from his cab before his truck had fully stopped. He ran toward the building, desperate for people, for help, for anything real. The truck stop was empty. Lights on, doors unlocked, but no people, no customers, no employees, no sounds of activity, just an abandoned facility that looked operational but wasn't. Behind him, the 7 convoy trucks pulled into the parking lot, arranging themselves in a semicircle around Michael's truck. The engines shut off simultaneously. The cab doors opened. 7 figures climbed out. They looked like truckers at first glance, the right clothes, the right build, but their movements were wrong, too smooth, like they were gliding rather than walking. They approached Michael slowly, deliberately. Michael backed toward the truck stop building. The figures followed, maintaining their semicircle formation, closing in. Michael could see their faces now, or what should have been faces. They had features, but the features didn't quite work together, like composite images that weren't properly blended. One of them spoke, and its voice was the same friendly voice Michael had heard on the CB when he first joined the convoy. "Why did you leave, Mountain Man? We were running together. That was the agreement." "What are you? Where's this place?" "We are the convoy. We've been running I-40 for a very long time. Decades. Maybe longer. We don't remember exactly when we started, but we need more drivers. The highway requires it. Join us. Drive with us. Forever." "I'm not joining anything. I want to go home." "Home doesn't exist anymore. Not for you. You joined the convoy. You agreed to run with us. The highway accepted you. You're part of it now." The figures closed in. Michael turned and ran into the truck stop, through the empty convenience store, looking for an exit, a phone, anything real. The figures followed, their footsteps making no sound on the tile floor. Michael found a back door and burst through it. Instead of a parking lot or loading area, he emerged onto I-40 again. The highway stretched in both directions, empty and endless. And behind him, through the doorway, the 7 figures appeared. Michael ran onto the highway, sprinting down the center line. He heard engines starting. The convoy trucks were moving, coming after him. He ran faster, his lungs burning, knowing he couldn't outrun trucks but having no other option. Then, ahead of him, Michael saw something different. A shimmer in the air, like heat waves. And through the shimmer, he glimpsed normal highway, cars, buildings, a Texas he recognized. The shimmer was a barrier between this place and reality. Michael ran toward it with everything he had. The convoy trucks accelerated behind him, engines roaring. He could feel their headlights on his back, feel the displacement of air as they closed in.
He hit the shimmer at full sprint and crashed through. Michael fell hard onto actual asphalt, rolling, scraping his skin. He came to rest on the shoulder of I-40, traffic passing normally, the sun at its actual morning angle. He was back. He'd escaped. But when Michael looked back at where he'd emerged, there was nothing. No shimmer, no barrier, just normal highway. The convoy was gone. The impossible truck stop was gone. He was alone on a perfectly ordinary stretch of Texas interstate. Michael's truck was gone too. No sign of it. He was on foot, bruised and bleeding, but alive and back in the real world. He hitchhiked to the nearest town and called his company to report his truck stolen. The company was confused. According to their GPS records, his truck was still traveling on I-40, making steady progress towards Memphis. But when they checked, they found the truck abandoned at a rest stop near Oklahoma City, fuel tanks empty, no sign of Michael.
Michael never drove commercially again. He'd lost time. According to the calendar, he'd been gone for 3 days, though it felt like hours to him. Those 3 days were blank, erased, leaving only his memory of the convoy from nowhere. He knows they're still out there. 7 trucks running in perfect formation on a highway that exists parallel to I-40, recruiting drivers, building their convoy. He knows that anyone who accepts their invitation joins them forever, driving endless miles through a place that's almost, but not quite Texas. And sometimes, late at night, Michael hears his CB radio, even though he doesn't own one anymore, even though he's hundreds of miles from any highway. He hears that friendly voice. "Mountain Man, this is convoy leader. You didn't finish your run. Come back. Complete your route. We're waiting." The convoy from nowhere is always waiting, always running, always recruiting. And Michael knows that one day he might hear that call again and not be strong enough to resist. The highway wants its drivers, and the convoy delivers them forever. Story 6. The Way Station That Weighs Souls. Brandon Ellis had been driving trucks for 20 years when he pulled into what he thought was a standard weigh station on Interstate 15 in Nevada on March 23, 2023. The sign indicated all commercial vehicles must stop, and Brandon was professional enough to never skip a required weigh station, even when he knew his truck was well under legal limits. He pulled onto the scale and waited for the signal. The facility looked normal. The small building with windows, an official-looking scale system, proper signage. But as Brandon sat there, engine idling, he noticed something odd. There were no other trucks, no one else waiting, no one being processed, just his truck alone at this station. The speaker crackled. "Please turn off your engine and step into the office." That was unusual. Normally, they'd weigh you, check your credentials electronically, and wave you through without you leaving your cab. But Brandon complied, shutting down and walking to the building. Inside, a man in what looked like an official uniform sat behind a desk. He was middle-aged, unremarkable, except for his eyes. They were too dark, like looking into deep wells. "Brandon Ellis," he said, consulting a clipboard. "You've been driving trucks for 20 years. That's a long time on the road." "Yes, sir." "Am I overweight? My load should be legal." "We're not weighing your truck, Mr. Ellis. We're weighing you." Brandon frowned. "I don't understand." "This is a special weigh station. We measure different cargo than most facilities. Please step onto the scale behind me." The man gestured to what looked like a standard bathroom scale against the wall. Brandon was confused, but didn't want to cause problems. He stepped onto the scale. The readout didn't show numbers. Instead, words appeared on the digital display. Guilt, heavy. Regret, moderate. Compassion, light. Brandon stepped off quickly. "What kind of scale is that?" "A moral scale. It weighs not your body, but your soul."
The actions you've taken, the choices you've made, the person you are. And, Mr. Ellis, I'm afraid you're overweight. This is crazy. I'm leaving." Brandon turned toward the door. It wouldn't open. The handle turned, but the door stayed shut, like it was welded in place. "You can't leave here until the inspection is complete. That's the regulation. All commercial vehicles must submit to weighing. You agreed when you pulled in." "You can't keep me here. This is illegal." "Illegal by human law, perhaps, but we operate under different authority. Please sit down, Mr. Ellis. We need to discuss your overages." Brandon had no choice. He sat in the chair across from the desk. The man opened a folder that seemed to appear from nowhere. 20 years of driving. 17 million miles logged. During that time, you've made numerous choices. Some good, many bad. Let's review, shall we? The man began reading from the folder, and with horror, Brandon realized it was a detailed account of his life. Not just his driving career, everything. Every lie he had told, every person he had hurt, every moral compromise he had made. 2007. You saw an accident happen. A car ran another off the road. You were the only witness, but you didn't stop, didn't report it, because you were running late and didn't want the delay. The victim died before help arrived.
I didn't know they died. You suspected, but you prioritized your delivery schedule over potentially saving a life. That's heavy weight, Mr. Ellis. The man continued reading. Infidelities, lies to his family, times he'd cheated on his logbooks, driven exhausted, endangered others for the sake of making deadlines. Small cruelties, moments of cowardice, ethical lapses that Brandon had rationalized or forgotten. Each one was documented in that folder in perfect detail. Your total weight is considerable, well over the legal limit for a soul. We'll need to remove some cargo. What does that mean? It means we take something from you. Memory, usually. We remove the heaviest burdens from your conscience, the worst things you've done. You forget them, and thus the weight is reduced. But then, I wouldn't remember. I wouldn't be able to make amends. Correct. The memory is gone, so there can be no atonement. But you'll be lighter. You'll feel better. Isn't that what you want? Brandon thought about it. Part of him did want that. To forget the worst things he'd done, to not carry that guilt anymore. But another part understood what was being offered was moral lobotomy. They weren't forgiving his sins, they were erasing his awareness of them. What if I refuse? Then you're detained here. Overweight vehicles cannot proceed. Those are the regulations. You'll sit in this office living through your worst moments on repeat until you agree to the reduction. As the man spoke, the office changed. The walls became transparent, showing scenes from Brandon's past. The accident he didn't report, the woman he'd betrayed, the child he'd nearly hit because he was texting while driving, every moment of shame playing simultaneously, surrounding him. Brandon closed his eyes, but that didn't help. He could still see the scenes, projected onto his eyelids, carved into his thoughts. The wait station was forcing him to confront everything he'd spent 20 years trying to forget or justify. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time was strange here. Brandon experienced his entire moral history, every bad decision, every harm he'd caused. The weight of it was crushing, literally painful, like his soul was being compressed. "Please," Brandon finally said, "make it stop. Take the memories. I'll agree." "Very well." The man picked up something that looked like a stamp. "This will hurt momentarily. Then you won't remember anything we've discussed. You'll be lighter, happier, free. Ready?" Brandon nodded, tears streaming down his face. He was broken, ready to give up his guilt and shame and responsibility, ready to be hollowed out if it meant the pain would stop. The man raised the stamp towards Brandon's forehead. Then Brandon stopped him. "Wait, if I forget, I can't change. I'll just make the same mistakes again. I'll hurt people again. The weight will come back." "Probably, but you'll be light for a while. Isn't that enough?" "No, it's not enough. I need to remember. I need to carry this weight because it's mine. I earned it. Taking it away doesn't fix anything. It just makes me less than I am." The man paused, studying Brandon. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was the first genuine expression Brandon had seen on his face. Interesting choice. Few drivers choose to keep their weight. "Can I leave now?" "Yes, you are free to go. You were always free to go. The door was never locked, Mr. Ellis. The only thing keeping you here was your willingness to stay." Brandon tried the door. It opened easily. He stepped outside into Nevada sunlight. His truck was on the scale, engine still idling. But when he looked back at the building, it was abandoned. Windows broken, paint peeling, clearly unused for years. Brandon climbed into his truck and drove away. The wait station disappeared in his mirrors. There one moment, gone the next. He completed his delivery to Las Vegas, then drove home to his family. The experience at the wait station had changed something fundamental in him. He couldn't undo the past, couldn't erase his mistakes, but he could acknowledge them and try to do better. Brandon started making amends where possible. He contacted the family from that 2007 accident, confessing his failure to stop, offering what help and apology he could. He repaired relationships he'd damaged. He drove more carefully, more consciously, prioritizing safety over schedules. The weight of his past was still there. He felt it every day, but Brandon learned to carry it without being crushed by it. Guilt became conscience. Regret became wisdom. The weight that had almost destroyed him became the foundation for a better version of himself.
He never saw the way station again, never found it on any map. But Brandon knows it's real, knows that somewhere on America's highways, there's a facility that weighs not cargo, but souls, that forces drivers to confront who they really are. Most drivers probably take the deal, probably let their memories be stamped away, their guilt erased. They become lighter, but emptier, capable of repeating their worst mistakes because they've forgotten they made them. Brandon chose differently. He chose to carry his weight, to remember, to change. It's harder, but it's real. And sometimes, late at night, Brandon thinks about the other drivers who stopped at that station, the ones who chose to forget. He wonders if they're out there, hollowed and light, driving without conscience, adding new weight they'll never acknowledge. The way station that weighs souls is waiting for them again, and next time, maybe they won't be strong enough to keep their memories. But Brandon will carry his weight forever, all of it, because that's what makes him human. That's what gives him a chance at redemption. The scale doesn't lie. It showed him exactly what he was, and Brandon accepted the truth, paid the price in consciousness and regret, and became something better. The way station is still out there, still weighing souls, still offering that terrible bargain. Forget everything and be light. Brandon hopes other drivers choose differently, but he knows most won't. The weight is too heavy. The memories are too painful. And the way station is always open, always ready to make that deal. Forever. Story 7. The Last Truck Stop. Angela Martinez had been hauling freight for 15 years when she stopped at a truck stop that shouldn't have existed on Interstate 70 in Colorado on December 5, 2022. She was running a load of winter sports equipment from Denver to Kansas City, planning to drive through the night to stay on schedule. Around 2 in the morning, somewhere in the empty stretches of eastern Colorado, Angela saw the sign, "Last Truck Stop, 50 miles, final services." The phrasing was odd, final services instead of the usual fuel, food, lodging. But Angela's fuel was running low, and she knew there weren't many options in this area. She decided to stop. 50 miles later, she saw it. A massive truck stop, far larger than seemed reasonable for this isolated location. Hundreds of parking spaces, dozens of fuel pumps, a huge main building that looked like a shopping mall. And it was busy. Trucks and cars filled the lot, people moving around, lights blazing against the dark prairie night. Angela pulled in and parked. The place had an odd atmosphere despite all the activity. People moved stiffly, mechanically, going through the motions of truck stop activities without any visible emotion or conversation. No one talked to each other, no one smiled. Everyone just performed their tasks in silence. She walked into the main building. It was enormous inside with shops and restaurants and services far beyond what any normal truck stop would have. There was a full grocery store, a movie theater, a library, even a small medical clinic. Everything a traveler might need, all in one place. But everything was just slightly wrong. The grocery store had products with brands Angela didn't recognize. The movie theater was showing films that didn't exist. The library had books with titles that made no sense, grammatically correct, but meaningless, like they've been generated by an algorithm that didn't understand human language. Angela approached the food court. A woman stood behind one of the counters, her smile fixed and empty. "What would you like?" Her voice was flat, affectless. "Just coffee, please." The woman poured coffee from a pot that never seemed to empty no matter how much she poured. She handed Angela a cup. "That will be your memory of home." Angela blinked. "What?" "Payment. We don't take currency here. We take memories, time, experiences. Coffee costs one happy memory from your childhood." "That's insane. I'll just pay with cash." "Cash has no value here. This is the last truck stop. Normal economics don't apply. Everything costs what it costs. Do you want the coffee or not?" Angela put the coffee down and backed away. This place was wrong on levels she was only beginning to understand. She needed to leave, to get back on the highway, to get far away from here. She returned to her truck, but when she tried to start it, the engine wouldn't turn over. She tried again. Nothing. Her truck, which had been running perfectly, was completely dead.
Angela looked around the parking lot. Every vehicle was in the same state. Drivers trying to start engines that wouldn't catch, mechanics opening hoods and finding nothing wrong, people gradually giving up and walking back toward the main building. Angela climbed out and approached another trucker, an older man sitting on his bumper with his head in his hands. "How long have you been here?" He looked up, his eyes hollow. "I don't know. Weeks? Months? Time doesn't work right here. I stopped for fuel. My truck died. I've been stuck ever since." "What is this place?" "The last truck stop. The sign told you. It's where travelers end up when they've run out of road, when there's nowhere else to go. We all stopped here thinking it was just another facility, but once you're here, you can't leave. The highway beyond this place doesn't lead anywhere. It just ends." Angela felt ice in her stomach. "That's impossible. I-70 goes all the way to Maryland." "Not from here, it doesn't. Here, it ends. This is the last stop before nothing. And now you're stuck with the rest of us." Angela refused to believe it.
She walked to the exit road, the access ramp that led back to the interstate. She walked up the ramp, determined to prove the man wrong. At the top of the ramp, the highway ended. Not construction barriers or road closure signs, the pavement simply stopped, giving way to a gray void that hurt to look at. The same absolute nothingness she'd heard about from Raymond Foster's story, if these stories shared a universe. The highway led to the edge of reality, and no further. Angela walked back to the truck stop, her mind reeling. The old trucker was right. This place was a dead end, a terminus, the last point before existence ran out. "How many people are trapped here?" Angela asked him. "Hundreds, maybe thousands. The truck stop is bigger inside than it looks. There are rooms, apartments, whole neighborhoods deeper in the building. People who've been here for years, maybe decades. They've made lives here because there's nowhere else to go." "But we can't stay here forever. We have families, jobs, lives outside." "Do we? I've tried calling my wife. The phone rings, but no one answers. My company doesn't respond to messages. I think maybe we already died out on the highway, and this place is what comes after. The last truck stop before whatever's next." Angela checked her phone. She had full signal, full battery. She called her husband. The phone rang and rang, but no one picked up. She tried her dispatcher. Same result. She tried 911. The call connected, but when she spoke, no one responded. She could hear breathing on the other end, but no voice, no acknowledgement. She was isolated, cut off, trapped in a truck stop that existed at the end of the world with no way forward and no way back. Days passed, or what Angela's phone claimed were days. Time felt strange, elastic. Sometimes an hour passed in minutes. Sometimes minutes stretched into hours. Angela explored the truck stop, finding it grew larger the deeper she went. Entire neighborhoods existed in the back sections, complete with houses and parks and schools, all populated by travelers who'd arrived and couldn't leave. They'd built a society here, elected leaders, established rules, created an economy based on memory and time, since normal resources were infinite but meaningless. Food and water appeared in the stores, no matter how much was taken. The building generated whatever was needed, but it demanded payment in the form of human experience. Want dinner? That costs the memory of your first kiss. Want a bed for the night? That costs an hour of your remaining lifespan. Everything had its price, and the price was always something essential to being human. Angela resisted participating in this economy. She slept in her truck, ate sparingly from the supplies she'd brought with her, tried to maintain connection to her real life, even as that life became more distant and dreamlike. But slowly, she felt herself fading. Without fuel from the truck stop's economy, she was becoming less substantial, less real. Other residents who'd refused to participate had become ghosts, translucent figures who wandered the parking lot without purpose, gradually disappearing entirely. Angela had a choice: participate in the nightmare economy, trade away her memories and experiences to maintain existence, or fade away into nothing. She chose a third option. She started documenting everything, writing down memories before they could be traded away, creating a record of who she was, who everyone here had been. If they were going to lose themselves to this place, at least there would be evidence they'd existed. Other residents saw what she was doing and contributed their stories. A library formed, a collection of written memories, preserved experiences that couldn't be traded away because they'd been externalized. The truck stop couldn't take what had been given to paper. The library grew. Hundreds of life stories, thousands of memories, a monument to everyone who'd been trapped here. And slowly, Angela noticed changes. The truck stop seemed less solid, less permanent. The library was creating weight, reality, something that countered the void's pull.
Angela understood then what the truck stop really was. It was a transition point.
a place where reality ended and nothing began. But it was maintained by the memories it collected, the experiences it consumed. By preserving those memories instead of trading them, Angela was starving the truck stop, weakening its hold on reality. She worked harder, encouraging everyone to write down everything they were, everything they remembered. The library expanded to fill entire floors, and the truck stop groaned under the weight of so much preserved human experience. Then, one morning, if morning had any meaning here, Angela woke up in her truck on the shoulder of I-70, not at the truck stop, but on the actual highway, with traffic passing normally. She was about 50 miles from where she'd taken the exit to the last truck stop. Her phone showed December 6th. She'd been gone for 24 hours according to the outside world, though it had felt like weeks inside the truck stop. Angela never found the truck stop again. The exit didn't exist on any map, but she knows it's real, knows that hundreds or thousands of people are trapped there, slowly trading away their memories and experiences to the void. She hopes the library she started is still growing, hopes that preserved memories will eventually collapse the truck stop entirely, freeing everyone trapped inside. But she doesn't know. Angela just drives now, avoiding isolated stops, never taking exits whose destination she can't verify. And she writes down everything, every memory, every experience, every moment of her life. Because if the void comes for her again, if she ends up at the last truck stop once more, she'll have armor. She'll have proof of existence that can't be traded away. The last truck stop is waiting. At the end of every highway, at the edge of every reality, it sits and collects travelers. It trades essential services for essential humanity, slowly draining everyone until they're empty, then discarding them into the void. But Angela found a way to fight it. Memory preserved is memory protected. Write it down, record it, externalize it, and the void can't consume it. She tells other drivers this now, when they'll listen. Keep journals, document your lives. Don't let your experiences exist only in your head where they can be taken. Because somewhere out there, the last truck stop is open for business, and its prices are higher than anyone should have to pay. Story 8. The Mirror Truck. Stephen Hughes had been driving long haul for 14 years when he noticed the truck that perfectly mirrored his every move on Interstate 90 through South Dakota on May 11, 2023. At first, he thought it was coincidence, another driver with a similar rig, running the same route, making the same decisions. But after 2 hours, coincidence became impossibility. Stephen drove a white Peterbilt with a red stripe. The other truck was identical. Stephen's trailer had his company logo on the side, so that the other trailer, same logo, same colors, same position. Stephen had a dent in his front fender from a parking lot incident 3 months ago. The other truck had the same dent in the exact same place. The truck stayed in the opposite lane, heading westbound while Stephen went east, but it was always visible, always maintaining position. When Stephen sped up, it sped up. When he slowed down, it slowed down. When he moved to pass another vehicle, it made the same pass in its lane at exactly the same moment. Stephen tried his CB. White Peterbilt westbound on 90, this is Iron Horse. You running a mirror truck or am I losing my mind? No response. But he saw the driver in the other truck pick up a CB handset at exactly the same moment Stephen had, making the same motions, like a reflection. Stephen felt cold fear creeping into his thoughts. He tried looking at the other driver directly, but every time he focused on the other cab, his vision blurred. Couldn't quite resolve the image. The truck was perfectly clear, but the driver was obscured, like trying to look at your own face in a dark mirror. Stephen pulled off at the next exit. The mirror truck took an exit at the same moment. Not the same exit since they were traveling opposite directions, but an exit at the exact same time, maintaining the perfect mirroring effect. Stephen stopped at a gas station and watched the highway. The mirror truck was gone. He'd broken the connection by leaving the interstate. He felt relieved, but also deeply disturbed. What had that been? Some kind of optical illusion? Mass psychosis? A coincidence that his mind had built into a pattern? He refueled and got back on I-90, heading east toward Minnesota. For an hour, everything was normal. Just regular traffic, regular driving. Stephen started to relax. Then, He saw it in his mirror. Behind him now, in the same lane, maintaining exact distance. The white Peterbilt with red stripe, same company logo, same dent. The mirror truck had found him again. But now, instead of mirroring his lateral movement, it was mirroring his forward progression, staying exactly the same distance behind no matter what Stephen did.
Stephen accelerated. The mirror truck accelerated. Stephen braked. The mirror truck braked. Perfect synchronization, like it was connected to his truck by an invisible, rigid bar. Stephen grabbed his phone and tried to take a picture of the truck behind him. When he looked at the photo, the mirror truck wasn't there. Just normal highway behind him, no vehicle at all. But when he looked with his actual eyes, it was there, following, matching, mirroring. Stephen tried weaving between lanes. The mirror truck followed perfectly. Every movement matched instantly. Stephen tried driving on the shoulder. The mirror truck followed onto the shoulder. There was no escaping it, no way to break the connection. Other drivers seemed not to notice. They passed the mirror truck, merged around it, drove normally as if it was just another vehicle. But Stephen knew it wasn't. It was something else, wearing the appearance of a truck, following him for purposes he couldn't imagine. As evening fell, Stephen realized something horrifying. The mirror truck was getting closer. Slowly, imperceptibly, it was closing the distance. When he'd first noticed it behind him, it was maybe 200 yards back. Now it was 100 yards, then 50. Stephen pushed his speed to the maximum, but the mirror truck matched him and still gained ground. 40 yards, 30, 20. At 10 yards, Stephen could see the driver. Or what should have been the driver. The cab was occupied by something that wore Stephen's face, but wrong. The features were his, but arranged slightly differently, like looking at a photograph that had been cut up and reassembled incorrectly. The thing that looked like Stephen raised one hand and waved. Stephen was hyperventilating now, panic overwhelming his ability to drive safely. He swerved toward an exit, taking it at dangerous speed. The mirror truck followed, staying exactly one truck length behind now. So close, Stephen could see every detail. It wasn't just the same model and company. It was his truck. The exact same license plate number, the same air freshener hanging from the mirror, the same coffee stain on the driver's door. It was a perfect duplicate, and it was going to catch him. Stephen drove into a town. He didn't even check which one, just took streets randomly, trying to lose the mirror truck in the turns. But it followed effortlessly, maintaining position. Its driver, with Stephen's wrong face, smiling now, enjoying the chase. Stephen pulled into a police station and ran inside. "Someone's following me. A truck identical to mine. The driver looks like me. You have to help." The police came outside. Stephen pointed at the mirror truck, parked one space behind his own truck in the lot. The officers looked where he pointed. "Sir, there's no truck there. Your truck is the only commercial vehicle in the lot." "What?" "No, it's right there. Look at it." But even as Stephen pointed, he realized he couldn't see it anymore either. The mirror truck had disappeared, or become invisible, or never been visible to anyone but him. The parking space behind his truck was empty. The police were sympathetic, but suggested Stephen might need rest, might be experiencing road fatigue or stress hallucinations. They offered to call someone to get him medical attention. Stephen declined and returned to his truck, shaken. He sat in his cab, trying to understand. The mirror truck had been real. He'd seen it for hours, but now it was gone, and no one else could see it, and there was no evidence it had ever existed. Stephen decided to continue his delivery. Maybe it had been a hallucination. Maybe he was more tired than he realized. He got back on the highway, heading east. The mirror truck was waiting on the on-ramp. As Stephen merged, it merged from the opposite side, and they were parallel again. The mirror truck in the westbound lanes, Stephen in the eastbound, perfectly synchronized. But now Stephen could see something that chilled him to his core. His mirror truck was ahead of him, not behind, not beside, ahead, westbound, but somehow also matching his exact position. And it was in better condition than his real truck. Cleaner, newer, no dent, running more smoothly. Stephen understood what he was seeing them. It wasn't a truck following him. It was the truck he should have been driving, the better version, the one that represented the better decisions he could have made. Every time he'd cut corners on maintenance, every time he'd driven tired when he should have rested, every time he'd prioritized schedule over safety, those decisions had accumulated into the difference between his truck and the mirror truck. The mirror truck was showing him what he'd lost, what he'd sacrificed, what he could have been if he'd made better choices. And it was coming to replace him. Over the next 100 miles, the mirror truck slowly pulled ahead, maintaining its westbound direction, but somehow also advancing past Stephen's position. It was moving forward through time as well as space, becoming his future instead of his mirror. Stephen saw flashes of that future, the mirror truck arriving at destinations Stephen wouldn't reach, the better version of him, greeting customers Stephen would never meet, living the life Stephen could have had if he'd been more careful, more conscientious, more professional.
The mirror truck was everything Stephen had failed to be, and it was taking over his reality, replacing him with a better version that made all the right choices. Stephen made a decision. At the next rest stop, he pulled over completely. He didn't fight the mirror truck, didn't race it, didn't try to stay ahead of it. He just stopped and let it pass. The mirror truck slowed, pulled onto the shoulder ahead of him, and stopped too. The driver, the better Stephen, climbed out and walked back. Stephen got out to meet him. The better Stephen spoke, and his voice was Stephen's voice, but clearer, more confident. You don't have to do this. You can make different choices. You can become me instead of letting me replace you. How? By acknowledging what you've lost, by committing to the driver you should have been. This isn't about punishment. It's about showing you what's possible. I'm not here to take over your life. I'm here to show you what that life could be. Stephen understood. The mirror truck wasn't a threat. It was a message, a vision of his potential if he started making better decisions. If he stopped cutting corners, stopped compromising, stopped letting exhaustion and pressure erode his professionalism. What do I have to do? Just be better, starting now. The mirror will fade when you become the person you're supposed to be. The better Stephen walked back to the mirror truck. He climbed in, started it, and drove away. This time, Stephen didn't follow. He sat at the rest stop for hours, thinking about his career, his choices, the slow erosion of standards that had made him less than he could be. Then Stephen started driving again, but differently. He followed regulations exactly. He rested when he needed to. He maintained his truck properly. He made the choices he'd been avoiding because they were harder or slower or less profitable. And slowly, over weeks and months, the mirror truck appeared less frequently. Sometimes he'd see it in the distance, a reminder of what he could be. But it was no longer chasing him, no longer trying to replace him. Stephen was becoming his own better version. The mirror wasn't needed anymore. He drives carefully now, professionally, with pride in his work and respect for the road. The mirror truck still exists somewhere, Stephen knows. It's the potential within him, the better choices he can still make. And sometimes, when Stephen sees another driver cutting corners or driving exhausted or compromising safety for schedules, he wonders if they've seen their mirror truck yet, if they've been chased by the better version of themselves, forced to confront what they're losing. The mirror truck comes for everyone eventually. It shows you what you could be, and then gives you a choice. Become that better self, or be replaced by it. Stephen chose to become better. He's grateful the mirror truck found him, even though it terrified him at the time. Because without it, he never would have realized how far he'd fallen or how high he could still climb. The mirror truck is waiting for all of us, showing us our potential, offering us a choice. Stephen hopes other drivers make the right one.